Let us look at this coalition sequel to the 2027 presidential election in Nigeria. Obi seems to have taken a very firm position talking about the Southern candidacy, because we understand that the North is already scheming to have the presidents of Nigeria come back to the North come 2027. And from what we are seeing, Obi have urged and demanded that the coalition should zone the ticket to South. Because from what we understand, the former Vice President Atiku'S is bent on contesting. But let me quickly read from Tribune, coming from P2B himself. He said P2B to ADC, zone 2027 presidential tickets to South. He go for that to say that P2B, the Labour Party's presidential candidate in the 2023 general election, has called on the African Democratic Congress, ADC, to zone East 2027 presidential ticket to the South. Obi made this appeal on Sunday in Ilori on the sideline of the second annual colloquium of Associate Professor Adumumin Yinka Ajia. His call emphasizes the importance of equity, unity, and national cohesion in Nigerian political landscape. At this point, let me quickly say that it is of paramount importance that the South should be allowed to complete their 8 years in Aso Rock. Because we understand that they not just completed their own when we had a Buhari in the saddle. But the way it is, I think anybody thinking that Atiku is not contesting should have a rethink. Because it's very clear when Atiku himself came out to say that in his presidency, under his watch, that is going to give women and youth 70% attention. And apart from that, we saw another statement that came from the former governor of Jigawa State, talking about Sule Lamido, where he made it clear that if Obi emerged victorious in the party primary, that he's going to support him. So it's going to show that actually the North have made up their minds to ensure that the man Atiku contests that election. Talking about the primary. But from what I'm seeing, it looks as if there was a trap set by some northern elements to make sure they hoodwink Obi into that coalition for the purpose of leveraging on his popularity and his followers to get to Aso Rock. Because we understand that the obedient movement has large followership. Of course, it cut across board, but the way it is, it's becoming very clear that the whole essence of bringing Obi on board is to ensure that Obi popularity is leveraged on. And we understand that Obi is someone who has been proven over and again to be competent, to have all it takes to pilot the affairs of Nigeria, particularly judging from his antecedent as the governor of Anambra State, as it has to do with his ability to cut costs of governance. Because he has been proven again that in Nigeria currently, of all the persons vying for that position, as someone who have what it takes in terms of prudent management of resources of government. But the way it is, I think the Obi himself and handlers have to be circumspect at this point, because if those who are managing ADC have equally come out recently to say they have agreed, all the aspirants have agreed to sign an agreement, a commitment, a covenant, an oath that after the primary, they will all support whoever emerged from the process. I think that is another trap that is being set for Obi, because if Obi eventually goes into that agreement, and at the end of the day, Atiku wins that primary, definitely Obi will be compelled by his word, by the agreement, to support Atiku. And perhaps, who knows, they will prevail on him at that point to become Atiku's running mate. Because even the Bible says, have respect for covenants. So it's an oath. Once you commit yourself by signing, you'll be made to obey it. But beyond that, I think the way it is very clear that the dynamics of Nigerian politics is changing or have changed significantly, judging by the demise of the former president of Nigeria, talking about Muhammadu Buhari. Because before now, we understand that Buhari command 12 million votes, almost in all round of election, cycle of election in Nigeria. The only time he didn't get that was when Yaradua contested against Yaradua. I think that was in 2011. So to that extent, the question is, who will now inherit Buhari's vote come 2027? Because the way it is, we understand that the CPC bloc, which Buhari controls, is already polarized. You have some in ADC, you have some stakeholders in APC. For instance, Makura, who is seen as the leader, made it very clear, even before the demise of Buhari, that he is going to remain in APC and that he is committed to President Ahmed Bola Tinubu's government. But shortly after he said that, we saw the likes of Malami, the likes of Babachilawa, of course, the former secretary to the federal government, coming out clearly, particularly Malami, to claim that Makura is not competent, or rather does not have what it takes to speak for the CPC bloc. And we are seeing recent time where it was reported that CPC bloc in APC may likely defect to the coalition. So the way it is, I think that vote is going to be polarized. And it is now turning out to mean that definitely the dynamics of Nigerian politics is changing, and of course, we may see a surprise. But again, Obi is someone who does not naturally rely on structure. He has proven that in the last general election, talking about the 2023 presidential election, when Obi was touted not to be on ground, we saw the defeat he recorded, even in areas where his party, talking about the Labour Party, didn't have presence. We saw what transpired in Delta State. In that election, the then governor of Delta State, Dr. Efficacy, was in PDP. Of course, he doubled as the PDP governor and the vice presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party then in that election. But it was overwhelming when Obi defeated him, even in his own very local government. The same thing transpired in those states and in all the southeastern states, all the south states. We only saw him recording success in Lagos, in Abuja, in Plateau, and some other places. So it's going to show that coalition or no coalition will be what it takes to win an election in Nigeria if the needful is done. And what is that needful? Talking about free, fair, and credible election. Because it's quite unfortunate that our electoral process is still susceptible to manipulation up to this moment. And the way it is, it doesn't matter the level of coalition. It doesn't matter the level of alliance. If we didn't get it right with our electoral process, the people who manage the process can still have access to manipulate it in favor of whoever they choose. Because the way it is, we understand that the government agencies that have responsibility in election management are all answerable to the executive. And you're going to an election where the executive has interest. Don't get it twisted. It's not about who is in Asura currently. It's about the system that needs to be corrected. Because the way it is, you have the police, the army, in some cases the Navy, DSS, in some cases the Air Force, that synergize with the umpire, talking about the INEC, for the purpose of management of the election. And all of these agencies are answerable to the executive. Even the umpire itself is answerable to the executive to the extent that they go cap in hand in collecting fund, asking for fund for their activities. So I'm of the view that so many things need to be reviewed in our election, in our electoral acts, and even the very constitution that govern our election. For instance, the funding of INEC, I'm of the view that it should be first line charge. A situation where they should be getting their funding directly from statutory allocation. Perhaps let the constitution make it and streamline their funding directly from source, just as we have the NEMA, Federal Road Maintenance Agency, that draws their funding directly from source and is stipulated by the law. And apart from that, even the appointment of INEC commissioners, the resident INEC commissioners in the 36 states, and even the appointment of the INEC chairman himself should be reviewed in such a way that it does not depend on only one man to determine who should be appointed. Because we have seen in the time past where some person will be appointed, at the end of the day, it will turn out to be loyalists, or even in some cases, card-carrying members of the ruling party. And beyond this, the most critical part has to do with the mode of transmission of election results. Recall that in the build-up to 2023 presidential election, arguments arose as to how to transmit election results, and there were pressure on the National Assembly to determine the mode of election results. And as we have it, INEC was compelled by the Constitution, or rather by the Electoral Act, after the amendment, that you must transmit the election results electronically. INEC did not get that compulsory transmission of election results electronically. Hence, it was the INEC that was given the liberty in that Electoral Act to determine the mode of transmission of election results. But before the election, INEC came up with their guideline, and they told Nigerians that they were going to transmit election results electronically. But surprisingly, at the nick of time, they reneged, and they gave excuse of network glitch. Of course, that formed the basis for which the election results were contested up to Supreme Court by all the major opposition political parties that lost the election according to the result of INEC. But the point here is, if we are going into the next round of election with that same Electoral Act, we'll come back to start singing the same song. So I'm of the view that the Electoral Act should be reviewed further, particularly Section 82, that deals with the mode of transition of election results. Let it be reviewed in such a way that INEC will be given specifics, be compared. Let INEC be compared by the Electoral Act that you must transmit election result electronically. Else, let the election result be null and void. Because for me, INEC is not responsible enough to be allowed to parade the discretionary power. So if you go into the next round of election with what we have currently, I must say that it is going to give us the same situation we had in the past. Because the Nigerian politician will always latch on any lacuna that is in the Electoral Acts. Because any area where the Electoral Act is susceptible to manipulation, Nigerian politician will always latch on it. And another issue has to do with the prosecution of election offenders of the law during the electionary process. Because if at the end of the election people will be arrested or some people will be accused, no prosecution, it will embolden others to do the same thing in the next round of election. Because I understand that the whole essence of law and order, the whole essence of prosecution is to act as deterrent to others. So if people are not being prosecuted to act as deterrent to others, definitely in the next round of election, those anomalies, those manipulation we saw, ballot snatching, ballot stuffing, and all of that, multiple tampering, we see characterize the election because those who did it in the past were not prosecuted to act as deterrent. So generally speaking, if there is no review of the Electoral Acts and you go into the next round of election with the current Electoral Acts, of course, we'll come back to start singing the same song. That is where I am a little bit worried that with the coalition, it will make no effect if the Electoral Act is not reviewed. But don't even get it twisted. It's not about who is in Aso Rock, because today, Senator Amebola Tinubu is in Aso Rock. Tomorrow, someone else will be there. But what we are saying is that anybody that is there will always take advantage of the Electoral Act that is susceptible to manipulation owing to the attitude or rather character of the average Nigerian politician. So the only way you can have free, fair, and credible election that meets international standard is to reduce human interference. And the only way you can reduce human interference is to go electronic in terms of transfer of election results. We can, as we grow, as we advance, as we evolve as a people, we can go towards total electronic voting. But for now, I don't think it's something we can achieve. But in the meantime, we can achieve electronic transfer of results. I think this is a food for thought for everyone. I must say very big thank you for your time. This is Sedla Media and I'm Mr. Matu.